In this video, I'm making a brand new ultra shallow aquascape in this 100 by 25 by 15 centimeter custom aquarium. A lot of you will remember the previous scape I made in this tank, so before we start the project, here's a little recap of how the natural river ecosystem went. So a couple of months after I set this up, I saw that one of my female CPOs was carrying eggs, so in order to give her some space, I took her away from the male and dropped her into the natural river tank. A few weeks later, I spotted about 20 babies roaming around in the gravel, and these little things are prolific breeders, and the first generation that dropped proceeded to drop even more, so before too long I had hundreds of little dwarf crayfish on my hands. Interestingly, they never bothered my hillstream loaches or the gobies in the tank, though they certainly did stop the hillstream loaches from breeding. I'm guessing they ate any of the eggs and any of the small babies that would have hatched. So after I accidentally created an army of crayfish, I moved into a new place, set up a brand new studio, and this shallow tank is the first tank I'm going to be working on. I've learnt quite a bit from the last one, so version 1, and I'm going to be doing some things a little bit differently this time around. So the light I'm using this time around is a Sinkor WRB, which I generally use on my vampire crab paludariums, and it's hanging on a cheap AliExpress light mount. I had to move the Dalua pixel light to my Carnivorous bog because the plants were getting too tall. The pump is a wave maker. I originally bought it for my reef tank, but it ended up being a little bit too powerful for that tank, and I wanted to try it in this tank, but that turned out to be quite a big mistake, which we'll talk about a little later in the video. So for the hardscape, this time around I'm using 30 kilos of mixed basalt, which I picked up from a local landscaping place. It worked out to about 40 US cents per kilo, which is a damn good price. So just like the previous tank, I'm arranging this in a fairly natural composition that you would typically find at the base of a fast flowing stream. Though I am going to go out of my way to make sure I purposely add some small caves, some cracks and some crevices, because the fish will really appreciate this once they move back in. And rather than buying a brand new batch of sand, I'm going to be reusing the same stuff that I used in the previous tank. I'm just mixing it up quite thoroughly and then pouring it in. If you remember from the last video, I added the sand and gravel first, but in all honesty, either way works fine, and you can even add the water before you add your hardscape and the rocks. It works okay in a tank like this. Finally, to wrap up the hardscape, I'm going to scatter a few smaller pieces of basalt around just to add a little bit more detail, though I'm not going to go overboard just yet. Since I have really hard tap water here, I usually use a mix of tap water and RO water to start with a slightly lower TDS. But since the future inhabitants don't mind my tap water parameters, this will be perfectly fine. I also don't have to worry about upsetting any fussy plants with high GH and high KH. Once I filled the tank with water, the craziest thing happened as well. A lot of the snails awoke and started roaming around the tank, which is pretty crazy considering I had this sand mix sitting in my basement during the middle of winter for a couple of months. Now that the tank is filled with water, we can talk about the issue with the wave maker, and shortly after I filled the tank, I connected a small external filter as well, which I've had running on another tank for quite a while. While this wave maker has plenty of power for this tank, it's a little bit too aggressive and doesn't have any guards on it, so if any shrimp or fish get caught up in the intake current, they'd pretty much get vaporized. So rather than take the risk with that, I switched back to the previous pump before adding any fish and any shrimp. Just like in the previous tank, I'm going to be adding my hillstream loaches and my rainbow gobies again. This is one of my absolute favorite fish combinations. They're super active, fun to watch, and they get along really well together. Last time I also added zebra danios, but I'm skipping them this time to give the potential hillstream loach babies some better odds at survival. I really want to breed them at some stage. Last time around, I also used a little hang-on back filter on the opposite end of the tank to pick up any debris that was pushed down to the opposite end of the flow. But that didn't really work so well, and I had to clean it quite often, so that's why I've got this slightly bigger canister filter doing the same job. On the last video as well, I also had quite a few questions about fish jumping out and evaporation, and I honestly didn't have any issues with the fish jumping out because I do run the water level a little bit lower than what I show in the videos. It's usually 2 to 2.5 centimeters below the surface of the glass. As for the evaporation though, it can be pretty high in summer as there is a lot of surface agitation, but for the rest of the year, I only have to do about one top up a week, which isn't too bad. The last thing is that after editing this video, a couple of the algae stains have started to really annoy me, and probably some of you guys as well. So now I'm seriously considering upgrading this tank to a 150 by 40 by 20, but I'll keep you updated on that, and I'll post a couple of update videos on this tank as well, because I've already made a minor little change and it looks really good.